A man spies on the girl next door through a small hole, and she doesn't even know it. This seemingly weak girl is the #1 killer in the country. She licked her fingers as she ate. Then she takes off all her clothes, one by one, but the angle of the hole was limited. In the end, it's just a lonely sight. How helpless she is in front of the screen, can you understand? From that day on, the man would observe the girl's life every day. Observe the girl's every smile and gesture. In fact, the man is a poor loser with no money and no job. On this day, he was going to strangle himself with the waistband of his pants. The hooks on the wall played a joke on him. Instead of dying, there was an extra hole. And when he looked at the wall, and found a pretty girl living across the street. The girl was fair-skinned and sweet-looking, instantly captured the man's heart. From then on, he was always watching the girl, because he was really poor. When he was hungry, he could only steal from his neighbor's takeout. That day, he was quickly eating an unknown takeaway, but when he turned around, Mary was standing upstairs watching him. He was so scared that he spat out a mouthful of 82 Coke.
違くて、こんなのがドアに不審物じゃないかなって。
Mary took pity on the man, invited him to her home for dinner, eating the goddess's food. The man was so happy. Before leaving, Mary told him if he liked his cooking. She told him if he liked his cooking, he could come back anytime. Simple Jack got a long-term ticket, and this gesture completely changed him. Jack decided to rectify his mistake and stop snooping. But a few minutes later, an honest body came back to the hole, and when he looked inside again, he found a terrible secret. Mary was wearing a raincoat, with a strange man in tow. The man wrapped his arms around Mary from behind, and the next moment, Mary suddenly backhanded the man. Then she stabbed him and blood gushed out, but the gentle Mary is now wearing a creepy smile. Jack was terrified. At that moment, the doorbell suddenly rang. Through the cat's eye, it was Mary. Looking at the sweet and lovely girl, she was convinced that it was all an illusion. By the next day, there was no murder story in the paper, and Jack finally let his guard down, and greeted Mary as usual. But it wasn't long before she heard a knock on the door next door. Man spies on the beautiful girl next door through a small hole in the wall. Seeing a girl bring a strange man home, the man began to be unruly when he entered the house. Suddenly, the girl easily overpowered the man with a grappling hand. Then she killed him with a knife. After killing the man, the girl smiled evilly. Jack next door was so scared that he screamed. At that moment, Mary also found him. Then a knife came through the hole. Jack fled in a panic. Mary followed him with the knife. Then she pushed Jack to the rooftop step by step. He asked Jack how he wanted to die. There was no way out for Jack. His legs were weak and he fell to his knees. Maybe it was the collapse of his faith or the threat of death. When Mary came at him and put the knife to his neck, Jack suddenly said, "Sarah, hey, hey, hey." And Mary said, "I'll sally-ho you too. I'll sally-ho you too." Was it a surprise? Was it an accident? And so the two of them lived together without shame. They began to talk through the hole in the wall. Mary became more reckless around him. On dates, she'd put on her raincoat and run off to kill someone. And Jack just watched. Mary never knew when to kill, on the subway or on a date. Whenever she wanted to, Mary said she killed bad people, so you don't have to sympathize with them. You just have to watch the show. But Jack was confused. Mary killed so many people. How come there's nothing in the papers about it? It's like they just disappeared. Until one night, Jack found his neighbor tied to his bed. He rushed to stop Mary, saying his neighbor was a cat lover. There's no way he's a bad guy. But Mary didn't hear him. She killed her neighbor with a knife to the throat. Looking at his dead neighbor, Jack's eyes flashed back to the image of his neighbor feeding his cat. He began to blame Mary for killing the wrong person. Then Jack realized. It turns out that Mary has a team of aftermarket professionals. They decompose the bodies and smuggle them out. They also make it look like they're traveling abroad. But the man still doesn't understand why he's killing his neighbor. To allay his fears, Mary took Jack to her neighbor's house, where Jack saw photos of all kinds of animal cruelty and many tools and animal parts. It turned out that his seemingly kind neighbor was also a sadist. He knew he had wronged Mary. In the middle of the night, the idea came to him to stop killing. The two of them lived a life of shame and dishonor. They'd been dating and killing people at the same time. If you have such a girlfriend, what would you do? Jack hugged Mary, begging him to stop killing. But Mary took out chopsticks and put them on Jack's neck. A few days later, a gangster came to Mary. He wanted Mary to kill someone for him. Mary didn't agree. He had principles and boundaries. The boss was furious, so he grabbed Jack to teach Mary a lesson. Jack was innocent of the crime. Mary looked at the cuts on Jack's face. She felt that Jack was not as handsome as he used to be. He was heartbroken and furious. She decided to take revenge on the boss. Jack rushed to stop him. He advised Mary not to kill again. Mary cried and said, "If you can't accept it, let's break up." After that, Mary turned around and left. That night, Jack continued to spy. He found that after Mary killed someone, she was sad and crying instead of smiling. He thought Mary was forced to kill to protect herself. In a fit of anger, Jack went to the gangster's chassis. He went up to the gangster's chambers and delivered a blow to his head. Then Jack, a weakling, was beaten up by the gangsters. And then the boss was ready to kill him with a knife. At that moment, the light suddenly went out. Then a tear gas canister flew in. Mary walks in with a cold look in her eyes. He leaned over and looked at the wounded Jack. Then he picked up a knife from the floor and started to kill them one by one. Seeing that his men couldn't stop Mary, the boss took out his katana and prepared to fight. Mary dodged. Then she turned her head back and pulled out a perfect shot. He came to Jack's side to finish the job. At that moment, Mary realized, then to kill the villain. Jack, who had stood by him, was more important. At the end of the story, Mary gave up being a professional killer, and became Jack's guardian angel. How fickle are women? She can be a sweet and gentle lamb, or he can be a cold-blooded killer. That's why it's not advisable to mess with sweet-looking women, because when they get tough, I'm afraid we won't be able to handle it.